Video games have been a staple to people pretty much all ages for generations. Not only was it able to bring friends and family together in front of a single screen, it also gave them a new sense of competition and camaraderie that wasn't really achievable in traditional media or real-world activities. Arcades were once the thriving hotspots for this fun, and later living rooms where probably most late millennials and early Gen Zers shared most of their laughs and rivalries gaming. Somewhere along the way though, something changed. In the early days when you bought a game, you owned it. The cartridge or disc was yours forever, no strings attached. The value was simple, one purchase, endless fun. Whether it was hours of grinding a Final Fantasy adventure, fighting friends as your favorite Nintendo character in Smash Bros, or playing through an intense and cinematic Metal Gear story, you got what you paid for. Now compared to today, the price of entry isn't just a sticker price on the box, if it even has one. Now the true cost of a game is only found in an endless stream of microtransactions, seasonal passes, and expansion packs. And to add even more fuel to the fire, most modern games you buy with your money aren't even yours. They're basically just admission tickets to digital storefronts at this point. Last year, Ubisoft Director of Subscriptions Felipe Tremblay notoriously stated, "One of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. That's a consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game." This obviously caused major outrage and sparked the now famous Stop Killing Games movement, a cry from players who don't want their games and hours of progress and achievement Thanos snap just because a corporation decides it isn't profitable anymore. Gaming used to be about experiencing an art form that resonated with you. Now it just feels like a cheap Redbox rental or a subscription for soulless fun. And that subscription ain't cheap either. Let me just break down the logistics of some microtransactions and show you the true cost of modern gaming. Let's take Call of Duty for example. You buy the base game for $70, right? Then every couple months they release a seasonal battle pass totaling to 6 in its yearly life cycle. These battle passes can range from $10 for the basic pass and $30 for the copy-paste sell edition. So if my math is mathing correctly, that's anywhere from an extra $60 to $180 if you want to complete all the passes. Of course it doesn't stop there though. COD's real bread and butter are their operator bundles. Most of the normal ones run about $20 to $25. And then you have their collab bundles, where they have just about every character from pop culture and entertainment that definitely belongs in a military first-person shooter. And these could run your pockets anywhere from $30 to upwards of $100 if you want everything that collab has to offer. Now if you take all that, the game, the skins, the passes, I didn't even bring up the fact that you can pay to complete them, you're looking at well into the hundreds, if not over $1,000 if you're a hardcore COD fan with 2 brain cells and disposable income. Now obviously this is just one example and I can go on and on about this. So I will. Fortnite has grown to become the gold standard for video game monetization, with their weekly rotating shop of exclusive skins with much more enticing pop culture collabs than COD I might add, with probably 10 times the catalog size, not even including the countless other customization features you can buy. Apex Legends locks all their best cosmetics behind randomized loot boxes and limited time events, where you're either grinding 23/6 or of course you can just buy everything to unlock your awesome, shiny, new $180 melee weapon. Destiny 2, which initially costed $60 before flipping off those early buyers and switching to free to play, because why charge for the game when you can charge for overhyped expansions and of course, battle passes. Now full transparency, I honestly don't have a problem with the concept of microtransactions. I actually enjoy a lot of them and have no problem supporting a game that deserves it. It's only when it becomes that game's foundation, when it takes away its true identity. That's the real issue most people have with them. Like, it's not fucking rocket science. You make a good game and focus on that first and people will want to buy shit from it, even if it's ass. Why? Because people like to support things they actually enjoy. And I'm tired of hearing the excuse, yeah, but you don't have to buy it. Yeah, and your fat ass probably don't have to buy a burger for dinner, but you don't feel like cooking. I'm talking to myself, by the way. We're all human, and at our roots, all we do is seek dopamine rushes through our own vices. And almost every major industry preys on that, using psychological tricks to milk us for every penny. The video game industry is definitely no different, utilizing tactics such as FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Items that'll just vanish if you don't buy them within whatever limited time frame you have. grinding versus convenience, deliberately padding stats or giving shortcuts to players that can afford it. Is why spend hours actually playing the game when you can get that instant gratification from your wallet. The glorification and addiction of gambling, the ability to buy virtually unlimited random drops, loot boxes, and wheel spins. Just one more, and I'll get that 0.000001% chance item. You know, I'm honestly ashamed to admit it's taken me over 20 years to realize that all of this shit is by design. Monetization in video games is much less about offering value and much more about exploiting your psychology. And these predatory practices are the main catalyst to the revolution brewing right now. Not just for the microtransactions themselves, but for the reasoning behind them. And I'm sure you're also thinking why. Like, why has microtransactions been so standardized and forced upon gamers? Well, to answer that, let's take a step back and look at how these games are actually made. 15 years ago, AAA games had a pretty straightforward developmental process. The studio would pitch an idea, build it, and polish it, with the goal of giving you a full product for $60, maybe to get an expansion or DLC down the line. But the actual developmental process was about completing the game's vision upon release. Now is an entirely different beast. Before development even starts, investors and publishers step in and ask one main question. How do we keep people spending after launch? The pitch went from, here's our story, here's our new cool concept, to here's our monetization strategy and projected revenue stream. Battle passes, cosmetic shops, loot boxes, seasonal content, all of that shit I just discussed is baked into the blueprint before a single character model or line of code even exists in most cases. And because those investors are the ones writing the checks, they abuse that power to call the shots, just walking all over the creative direction of the developers. Decisions now dictated by revenue targets and engagement charts. These games are no longer greenlit based off their artistic vision. They're only greenlit if the executives believe they can turn into a long-term spending platform. This is the core change in modern AAA game development. It's no longer about just making a game, it's about building a business model first and then wrapping that game around it. Now still, the question stands though of why? Is it corporate greed? Of course, but even more so, it's desperation. These studios become increasingly more desperate as they realize they bit off more than they can chew in their initial pitch. False promises all made an effort to please their investors' wishes, who themselves only had their shareholders in mind. So what happens is the foundation starts to crumble when they realize they lack the coordination with the developers' original visions. So instead of scaling back and rehashing with their team, they double down. They 5x their team size only to dilute the vision even more. They increase their monetization model, begin a way too early and expensive marketing campaign, and start asking us for pre-orders before the game is even in its alpha stage in a lot of cases. All of this in effort to replace the now $250 million hole created from their own negligence. I don't care how big, how advanced, or how imaginative you want your game to be. There is zero reason why any video game should cost the same as a f***ing Marvel movie, bro. Billions have gone down the drain in this industry in just the last decade alone. Just flop after flop after flop, all in an effort of trying to be the next Fortnite or Destiny or Grand Theft Auto. But for every one of those, there will be 20 Concords, because these games didn't become successful based off their monetization models, but because they built a proper foundation and player base organically. That's why now it's so sad to see so many of them starting to fall from the pedestal that they once stood. And when their predecessors do inevitably flop, it's not the executives who pay the price, it's the developers who is just following orders. There's been a large influx of layoffs in this industry in just the last 2 years alone. Thousands of actually talented individuals and whole studios completely eradicated. Even when they do deliver a critically acclaimed game, it's just not acclaimed enough for their wallet. You know, they say, don't bite the hand that feeds you. But what if that hand is punching you in the fucking mouth before you even get a chance to chew? Now, if their predatory corporate greed wasn't enough for you, let's just briefly listen to the way they talk to the people who pay their mortgages. I'm sure y'all probably heard most of these, but I just like to compile them to give y'all a sense of the big picture. Way back in 2011 during a conference, former EA CEO John Redicis famously stated, when you are 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo in your clip, and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're not really that price sensitive at that point in time. Just blatantly admitting to psychologically and financially manipulating gamers. More recently, in 2018 at BlizzCon, fans gathered for a highly anticipated new Diablo game, just to find out it's mobile slop. And when genuinely asked by a fan if there was going to be a PC version available, Diablo developer Wyatt Chang responds,
"Current plan is to be on mobile, both Android and iOS. We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC." Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones.
Completely dismissing the fact that they were clearly led on to believe this would be an actual platform release. Shit's crazy, right?
But wait! There's more!
While not a direct statement, Sony made it abundantly clear that their priority was commerce and not connection during the Epic Games vs. Apple lawsuit of 2021. It was revealed that PlayStation charges publishers a crossplay fee in an effort to maintain some revenue from in-game purchases like V-Bucks. Not only did this prove that greed ran the tech giant, it also showed how low on their list of priorities their consumers once are. Just a couple months ago in May, Borderlands fans became increasingly more concerned with its fourth installment potentially being $80. So Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford responds with, "Rail fans would make it happen." Gamers are no longer the priority, only our bank accounts are. And nothing I said so far even takes into account the countless workplace-related issues within the studios themselves. Numerous reports and lawsuits of toxic and dangerous workplace environments, employees working well beyond the legal limit in their mental capacities, while having to deal with disrespect and even sexual coercion in some cases. So when you do all of these things, and still have the gall to maintain that hubris, a revolution isn't optional, it's inevitable. And the spark has already been lit. We see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's coming from the passion of indie developers. Indie games have been making a much needed resurgence. Smaller studios thriving while these monoliths stumble. Studios with teams and budgets a fraction of the size of a AAA studio. I'ma just say it, 2025 has been the best year of indie games of all time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen this much success, this much power, this much gravity from indie games in any other given year. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Repo, a simple lethal company-esque co-op horror game made by a Swedish studio with under a dozen employees, took the world by storm early this year with a peak player count of 270,000. Less than a month later, Schedule 1, a quirky drug dealer simulator, released to even more success with a peak player count of 460,000, all made from a single developer. Another month later came what people call the holy grail of turn-based games, as well as frontrunner for Game of the Year, the breathtakingly beautiful Clair Obscur Expedition 33, a French-made indie game in a AAA skin made on Unreal Engine 5 that doesn't just work, but does just about everything right. From the music, to the story, to the snappy combat, this game seems to have it all at a fraction of any AAA budget and team size you can think of. Estimated to be made by around 30 people for only $30 million. To make a Game of the Year contender. Game of the Year front-running contender. Now, just this month, Team Cherry's infamous Silksong finally released with outstanding reviews. The predecessor to the critically acclaimed Hollow Knight didn't just live up to its insane hype and expectations, it smashed straight through them, with numbers rivaling some of the greatest games of all time. It broke several records on launch, such as the most wishlisted game on Steam, sitting at over 5 million, the highest player count at launch for an indie game with over 500,000, and reached a whopping 5 million concurrent players within 72 hours. It also, upon release, was the #1 bought game across all platforms, which caused all of their storefronts to crash from the sheer number of transactions being made. All of this from a tiny Australian-based studio with 3 main developers with a price point of only $20. Silksong is already being thrown into Game of the Year conversations, not even a month after release. And if that were to happen, half of the Game of the Year nominees can potentially be indie games. The other 2 being Expedition 33 and Blueprints, which I didn't even mention, but I don't really know too much about it, but from what I've seen, it's an indie roguelike and has been one of the best reviewed games of 2025. If one of these games were to win, it wouldn't just be a big deal, it would be monumental. No indie game has ever been crowned with this title. There's only ever been a handful nominated period and never simultaneously. This could be a big push for the revolution. This could bring change because studios will have no choice but to drop their tyrannical tendencies and follow suit. But even still, I think there's one more straw to break the camel's back. Call of Duty. A game I once thought fondly of. A game that was a key piece to my childhood and friendships I have to this day. A game that is now one of the front runners of this despicable shareholders first movement in this industry. Black Ops 6 was supposed to be their next hit, a return to form. And I won't lie, it was probably the most excited I was for a COD game since the original Black Ops released over a decade and a half ago. Jesus Christ, I'm old. But of course, again, I was met with disappointment within the first couple months. Just a bloated mess weighed down by its monetization and lackluster gameplay changes. But what is truly different this cycle is players are finally beginning to open their eyes. Black Ops 6 actually had the best launch in the franchise's history, bringing in a whopping 33.7 million players. Of course, their addition to Game Pass was a huge help, but that number is still impressive nonetheless. But what's even more impressive is that they managed to drop that player count by around 30%, losing half of its Steam player base alone in the first month. This means that even with its addition to Game Pass, Black Ops 6 has had the sharpest decline in players probably since the disaster that was Vanguard almost half a decade ago. And what did they do with this information? Announce Black Ops 7. The teaser trailer was first released with some people having a glimmer of hope from the fancy visuals and cinematics. Then came the gameplay trailer, and that glimmer was blown away faster than a Bonnie Blue line. The video was dislike bombed to hell, and deservedly so. Not even because the actual gameplay was necessarily horrible, not saying it was great either, but my issue was that it was maybe 6 seconds of it in the entire video. But you know what there was? Rock music with synchronized gunshots and fast jump cuts. What we all look forward to in a gameplay trailer, of course. But aside from their poor and out of touch video editing, what they did show was just a clusterfuck of randomness that amounted to nothing really. Edit, I recorded this before the early gameplay trailer dropped, but my point still stands. It's just a seizure-inducing clusterfuck still. So of course with this and the rapid decline of Black Ops 6, fans are now more skeptical than ever. All the signs are pointing to this game being DOA, and you know what? I honestly hope it is. And I'm not one to prey on the downfall of any game or company, but it's for a good reason, trust me. If a juggernaut like Call of Duty actually collapses, if people actually walk away and plant their feet in the sand this time, it will be massive. Second edit because I make videos at the speed of an elderly sloth. So the beta came out and I played it. Yeah, they're cooked. I actually had a tiny teensy weensy inkling of faith, but nah, they're cooked. That shit is hot basura. It somehow feels even clunkier than the Black Ops 6 movement at even higher crackhead speeds, and the verticality they boasted about is about the same as a 13-year-old attempting parkour. Now I'm not going to get into a full review because 1, it's just a beta, and 2, it's not the point of this video, but to get back on topic, yeah, unless they push the release date or revamp a lot, I'm 99% sure this game's losing a lot of money. Call of Duty isn't just some run-of-the-mill AAA game, it's one of the industry's biggest cash cows, a franchise that's been around for decades and withstood its highs and lows while others withered away. If they fall, while Indy is on top of the mountain, the gaming industry isn't just shifting, it's getting flipped on its neck like a fight with Rampage Jackson. So after taking everything I just said into consideration, I'll wrap up with this. To all the executives, chairmen, CEOs, or whatever title they like to hide behind, here's a little food for thought. More players are boycotting your skins. More players are boycotting your games. More players are utilizing their voice in social platforms. More players are putting actions to those words. And more players are supporting studios that actually deserve it. Because we're tired of the disrespect, tired of being your ATMs, tired of our voices being outweighed by a fucking spreadsheet. We're out of patience. A revolution is coming sooner than you think. And to all my fellow gamers out there, remember we have the power. We are the influence. And we have their greatest strength and weakness. Our wallets. So for every predatory battle pass you refuse to buy, every genuine indie developer you support, every time you make your voice heard publicly, we push change in this industry. And they can only ignore that push for so long before falling. The revolution is coming. But it starts with us.